Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Good morning and welcome to this fifth episode of the radio program Discovering Sacred Christian Art by WCAT Radio. And my dear listeners, today I want to remember the figure of Saint John XXIII that we celebrate today. Today is the liturgical fest, a figure of a pope, and this memory fits with the theme of our talk today. It is the second episode dedicated to the Basilica of Saint Peter. But before, I want to remember the figure of our Saint John XXIII, born as Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli here in Italy, in Bergamo area. And with him, I want to remember also the figure of his close friend, another pope from Lombardy, Pope Paul VI, who will be canonized on Sunday, the 14th of October. I will not be in Rome, unfortunately. I was in Rome in the day of the canonization of Saint John the 23rd and John Paul II. But Sunday, I will be in the town that is the birthplace of Pope Paul VI, because we will have a television program in connection with the Vatican. Both these figures, Saint John XXIII and Pope Paul VI, they had a strong connection in their lives. They have been friends, they have been close friends, and they had dialogues, and both were born here in North Italy, in Lombardy. Pope John XXIII was born in the town of Sottomonte, here close where I am living with my husband, in Bergamo area. While Pope Paul VI, he was born in Brescia area, that is the province, the neighbor province to Bergamo. Pope John XXIII was born on 25th of November in 1881, and he died on the 3rd of June 1963. He was the Pope starting from the 28th of October 1958 until his death in 1963. And as we know, was canonized on 27th of April 2014. He was born, as I recall before, as Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli. He was the fourth of 14 children born in a family of sharecroppers who lived in a village in Lombardy, here, Sottomonte, in Bergamo area. The name of this town is now Sottomonte John XXIII. Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli was ordained to the priesthood on the 10th of August 1904 and served in a number of posts as nuntius in France and a delegate to Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. In a consistory on 12th of January 1953, Pope Pius XII made Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli cardinal as the cardinal priest of Santa Prisca, a title in addition to naming him as a Patriarch of Venice. And then Roncalli was elected Pope after the death of Pope Pius XII on 28th of October 1958, at the age of 76. He was the first Pope to take the pontifical name of John upon election in more than 500 of years, and this choice his choice, because he said was a personal choice, settled the complicated question of official numbering attached to this papal name for the period of Avignon. So another thing very interesting is that Pope John XXIII surprised the world because he organized the historic Second Vatican Council that started with the opening on the 11th of October 1962. So pay attention. This is the reason why we remember this particular figure of saint right today. We remember him not because of the day of the birth or of the death, but because of the day of the opening of the Second Vatican Council that happened on the 11th of October 1962. But we can remember that historical date also for another event. In the evening of that day, the Pope, John XXIII, began his famous and very full of emotional insight discourse to the moon. And our grandfathers, grandmothers, and mothers and fathers here in Italy, they all remember that discourse, full of emotion. Well, Pope John XXIII did not live to see, as you know, the Vatican Council to completion. He died on the 3rd of June, 1963, and it took to Pope Paul VI to go on with the works of the Vatican Council and to bring the Vatican Council to the closure. And, you know, the Second Vatican Council was closed on the 8th of December, the Immaculate Conception Day, on 1965. John XXIII died of stomach cancer, and we know that one of his most famous texts is the final encyclical, the Pacem in Terris. He was buried in the Vatican grottos beneath Saint Peter's Basilica some days after his death, and his cause for canonization was opened on 18th of November 1965 by his successor, Pope Paul VI, who declared him as a servant of God. And then, in addition to being named Venerable in 1999 by Saint John Paul II, he was beatified on the 3rd of September 2000 by Pope John Paul II, alongside Pope Pius IX and other figures. Well, get ready, my dear listeners, because Sunday, as I recalled at the beginning of my discourse today, we will have the canonization of Pope Paul VI, of the Archbishop Romero, and other new saints. And for this 5th episode, I wanted to recall all what I explained in the episode number 4, the episode entitled Early Christian Art, St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican Basilica, the Ancient Basilica. So, if you want, I suggest you to listen again the episode number 4, and then to listen this episode. So, in order to have a clear image of my discourse, of what I am explaining about the history of our marvelous, beautiful Basilica of Saint Peter. Let me start with a short introduction about our Basilica. And I want to thank our Dr. Sebastian Mahfoud because he inserted images and references for a photo gallery on the website of our discoveringsacredchristianart.com. And, of course, if you have doubts or questions, you can email me at mferri@holyapostles.edu. Let me repeat, mferri@holyapostles.edu. Well, at the beginning of the 16th century, it was decided for the total reconstruction of the Basilica of Saint Peter and then of the ancient basilica wanted by the Emperor Constantine was slowly demolished, starting from the presbytery, to make room for a new, great, splendid basilica that is the church that we can see today. However, divided at the time of Pope Paul III, that was Pope between the end of the 15th century and the middle of the 16th century, by a wall called the so-called Farnesian Wall from the new cruise under construction, survived and was used for almost the entire duration of the building site, until when, in 1609, it was not definitively demolished by the will of Pope Paul V, overcoming the last perplexities. Please remember, my dear listeners, the name of Pope Paul V, because you will see his name in front, in the facade of the Basilica of Saint Peter. It is Pope Paul V. Pay attention. A beautiful mosaic of Giotto's school, called the Angel of Giotto, Tondo with an angel, was saved by a Monsignor, Monsignor Girolamo Simoncelli, and still adorns the church of San Pietro Ispano in Boville Ernica, in the province of Frosinone, Italy. In fact, even in this phase of the construction of the new basilica, started in the 16th century, there was no shortage of those who opposed this part demolition and therefore those who opposed the completion of the project by Michelangelo. This kind of devotion to the ancient basilica, that is the Constantinian basilica, led various scholars to leave detailed descriptions that handed down their memory to posterity. And this was for many writings dedicated to the ancient basilica. Well, the second basilica, the new Basilica of Saint Peter. I remember that in the episode number 4, I started to explain you some important elements of the new basilica. The construction of the current St. Peter's Basilica that you can see today was begun on 18th of April, 1506, under Pope Julius II. Pope Julius II of the family della Rovere, the Pope of Michelangelo. And the works ended in 1626 during the pontificate of Pope Urban VIII, while the arrangement of the square in front ended only in 1667. The original drawings of the basilica were found in 1866 by the Austrian art historian Heinrich von Geymüller. However, it is a reconstruction, given that on the same site before this new basilica that we can see today stood the ancient Basilica of Constantine on the era of Emperor Nero's cycles, as I recalled from the episode number 1, and our contiguous necropolis, where the tradition says that Saint Peter, the first of the apostles of Jesus, had been buried after his crucifixion. As I told you today, you can only imagine the grandeur of this building, immortalized or in some artistic representations. The plant, enriched over the centuries with precious works of art, was divided into 5 naves with wooden cover and presented analogies with that basilica, that is, Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, San Paolo fuori le mura, because it had 120 altars, of which 27 dedicated to Mary. After various projects, we arrive at what turned out to be the definitive project, the project by Michelangelo Buonarroti. And as I recalled in the past episode, the history of the project of Michelangelo Buonarroti for the new St. Peter's Basilica is documented by a series of construction documents, letters, drawings by Michelangelo Buonarroti himself and other artists, frescoes, and testimonies of contemporaries such as Giorgio Vasari. Despite this, the information that can be obtained is often in contradiction with each other. The main reason is that Michelangelo never wrote a definitive project for the Vatican Basilica, preferring to proceed by parts. However, after Michelangelo's death, several recordings were printed in an attempt to return an overall view of the design conceived by Michelangelo, including those of Stephen Duperac, which immediately became the most widespread and accepted designer. Michelangelo wanted to base his model on the central plan of the original project in order to emphasize more the impact of the dome, the famous dome of the Basilica of Saint Peter. In order to prevent the risk that after his death someone altered his design, Michelangelo started the construction site in different parts of the Basilica. But pay attention, with the exception of the facade, where the remains of the early Christian basilica were still standing, so as to oblige his successors to continue the construction according to his concept. Therefore, at the ideal of the Renaissance equilibrium, the order, the symmetry, Michelangelo contrasted the strength and the drama that came from his genius. First, on the eastern side, he designed a portico with a facade surmounted by an attic, thus giving a main direction to the whole building. Then, after demolishing parts already made by his predecessors, he still reinforced the supporting structures in support of the dome. The fulcrum of the new project would have been the dome. It still is a famous part of the basilica, still today. Inspired in the conception of the double cap to the dome designed by the famous Filippo Brunelleschi for the Florentine Cathedral of Santa Maria of the Flower, Santa Maria del Fiore, in Florence. So Michelangelo was inspired by Filippo Brunelleschi for the Florentine Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. The fulcrum of the new project would have been the dome, and that was. In 1564, at the death of Michelangelo, the dome in that days had not yet been finished, and the works had reached the height of the drum. So it was another architect, Giacomo dalla Porta, well-known artist and sculptor of the school of Porlezza, to complete it. And he gave completion to the dome from 1588 until 1590. Well, we can say that what we can see today is the result of this work concluded by Giacomo dalla Porta, who projected also 2 minor domes, essentially having an ornamental function. And a study, as I recalled in episode 4, a study on the reuse of ancient columns inside the basilica recovered during the direction of Michelangelo has shown that in all probability some of the great granite columns in the transept and in the apse of the bottom come from the Temple of Venus in Rome. How was the project completed? The construction of the present St. Peter's Basilica was begun on April 18, 1506, under Pope Julius II, and ended in 1626, during the pontificate of Pope Urban VIII, while the arrangement of the square in front ended only in 1667. In 1611, Papal blessing was given for the first time from the new lodge. In 1614, the barrel vault of the central nave was worked, while in 1615, the partition wall that divided the ancient basilica from the new basilica was demolished. At the same time, the walls of the side chapels were made, and in 1616 the confession was concluded. At the same time, many craftsmen worked on the decorative apparatus, began already in 1576, with the mosaic covering the Gregorian chapel, and continued between the end of the 16th century and the beginning of the 17th century with the mosaic decoration of the Great Dome and the Clementine Chapel. In the definition of the ornamental apparatus, the famous Gian Lorenzo Bernini and his aides played a fundamental role, working on the octagon under the dome. The new basilica, completed with the large statues at the top of the facade, was consecrated by Pope Urban VIII on November the 18th in 1626. Pope Urban VIII ascended on the papal throne 3 years before, and he played an important role in the conception and planning of the new basilica. Well, the marble cladding of the large plasters of the interior, until then treated in fake white marble, was only realized starting from the pontificate of Pope Pius IX with the construction of some bases, but the works were resumed under Pope Pius X in 1914, extending until the time of Pope Pius XI. What about the interiors? I would like to spend some words about the interiors, but I will speak about the interiors in the next episode. Now let me spend some words about the doors, because I want to connect the figure of Pope John XXIII that we celebrate today with the work of a particular door, the door of the death. Well, for what concerns general information on the interiors, St. Peter's Basilica is one, as you know, of the largest buildings in the world, 218 meters long and a height upon the 133 meters dome. The total area is about 23,000 square meters and can hold, they said, 60,000 faithful persons. The building is entirely walkable along its perimeter, although it is connected to the Vatican palaces by an elevated corridor along the right aisles and by the so-called Scala Regia at the edge of the facade on St. Peter places. Two corridors instead join it to the adjacent sacristy. although this aspect betrays the idea of an isolated building in the middle of a large square, as Michelangelo had probably thought. The presence of elevated passages, which do not interfere with the perimeter of the basilica, also allows us to grasp the complex articulation of the temple. The exterior in travertine is characterized by the use of a gent order over which the attic is set. The configuration is essentially due to Michelangelo and was also maintained in the longitudinal body added by Carlo Maderno. Instead, along the aisles, at the 45 altars and in the 11 chapels that open within the basilica are hosted several masterpieces of inestimable historical and artistic value, such as several works by Gian Lorenzo Bernini and others from the early Christian church, such as the famous bronze statue of Saint Peter attributed to Arnolfo da Cambio. And a copy of this famous bronze statue of Saint Peter is also in Saint Peter Church in Porto Venere, Liguria. Well, we can say that if you look at the facade, you see, let me read in English and translate it. In honor of the Prince of the Apostles, Pope Paul V Borghese, Pope Maxim Pontifex of Roman Church, in the year 1612, 7th year of his pontificate. This is because from the famous noble family of the Borghese came out a pope, Pope Paul V, not the 6th, because the 6th is the pope that we will celebrate on Sunday. Pope Paul V was a great lover of the art and of architecture. And he made possible the, the restoration, final restoration of the St. Peter Basilica. Let me spend now some words about the doors. The atrium with the porta of the Filarete architect is one of the most famous samples in architecture, and we have it in the Basilica of Saint Peter. To enter the basilica, beyond this main facade, there are 5 doors. The first door is a door to the extreme left that was built by the famous Italian sculptor Giacomo Manzù in 1964 and was completed after the death of John XXIII, and is known as the Door of the Death. It was commissioned by Pope John XXIII and takes its name because the funeral processions of the popes came to come out of this door. It is structured in 4 panels. The principal panel, in which is a representation of the deposition of Christ and of the Assumption to heaven of Mary. The second, the symbols of the Eucharist are represented, bread and wine, symbolically recalled by wine shoots and cut spikes. In the third box, the theme of the death is recalled, the killing of Abel, the death of Joseph, the martyrdom of Saint Peter, and the same death of John XXIII himself, who did not live to see this door. In a corner, it is recalled the encyclical Pacem in Terris. And then, from the inside of the basilica, there is the imprint of the sculptor's hand and the moment of the Second Vatican Council, the one in which the Cardinal Rugambwa, the first African cardinal, pays homage to Pope Saint John XXIII. And then we have the second door, that is the gate of good and evil. The third door, that is the central gate, or Porta del Filarete, as I recall. The fourth door, that is the door of the sacraments. and the fifth door, that is the last door, the door of the Jubilee. Well, I hope that, my dear listeners, I hope that these 5 radio talks dedicated to the discovery of the sacred art are for you of interest and help to understand the history and the themes of a Christian art. I wish you a blessed day, remembering today the figure of Saint John XXIII, with a prayer also to his friend Pope Paul VI, that will be canonized on Sunday, the 14th of October. I live in the same area in which both the 2 popes from Lombardy, John XXIII and Paul VI, were born, the 2 popes that were friends. In my next radio broadcast, which I will keep on Thursday, the 8th of November 2018, I will speak of the facade of the Basilica of Saint Peter, the main nave, the right aisle, the left aisle, the ambulatory, the transept, and the papal altar. So, let's prepare for the episode number 6 that I will deliver on Thursday, the 8th of November. Meanwhile, remember, if you want to write me, if you have some curiosity or doubts, you can email me at mferri.holyapostles.edu. Have a blessed day, and may God bless you. I am very glad to deliver this radio talk dedicated to the sacred art. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.